In Orthodox Christian theology, it's understood that God is not the author of evil. While the true source of evil may be mysterious, to understand our disordered desires as fallen humans, we must understand the one whom the Bible calls the murderer from the beginning. Rene Girard describes Satan as a principle of disorder as much as he is order. He writes, "If he could not protect his domain from the violence that threatens to destroy it, even though it is essentially his own, he would not merit the title of prince, which the Gospels do not award lightly." Jesus speaks of Satan as ruler of this world in John 12, verse 31, when predicting his death on the cross. To preserve what little control he has, Satan uses the order brought by the single victim mechanism to quell the war of all against all. The Bible refers to this phenomenon. And one of them, Caiaphas, being high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish." This brings us to one of Girard's more radical opinions, that Satan can in fact cast out Satan. Let's hear the words of Jesus. "And he called them to him, and said to them in parables, How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but is coming to an end." In response to this passage, Girard writes, Jesus does not deny the reality of Satan's self-expulsion. He asserts it. The proof that Satan possesses this power is the affirmation, frequently repeated, that this power is coming to an end. Further evidence of Satan as the source of the single victim mechanism comes in the Gospel of John. Jesus said to them, "If God were your Father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God. Nor have I come of myself, but He sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Because you are not able to listen to my word. You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it." First, it is important to note that Jesus claims that those who will the devil's desire are the devil's children. So Satan is not only the father of lies, but also of liars, as some patristics have pointed out. Likewise, Satan being both a murderer from the beginning and the father of lies alludes to the single victim mechanism. The single victim mechanism relies on the ignorance of the participants and the lie that the innocent is guilty. Girard describes Satan as totally mimetic. He's parasitic and relies on the mimetic process. This accords with the fact that Satan has no ontological existence, as evil is nothing more than an absence of God's goodness. The collective violence of the many against one is repeated throughout the parable of the tenants. Then he began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard and set a hedge around it, dug a place for the wine vat and built a tower, and he leased it to vine dressers and went into a far country. Now at a vintage time, he sent a servant to the vine dressers, that he might receive some of the fruit of the vineyard from the vine dressers. And they took him and beat him and sent him away empty-handed. Again he sent them another servant, and at him they threw stones, wounded him in the head, and sent him away shamefully treated. And again he sent another, and him they killed, and many others, beating some and killing some. Therefore, still having one son, his beloved, he also sent him to them last, saying, They will respect my son. But those vine dressers said among themselves, This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. So they took him and killed him, and cast him out of the vineyard. Therefore, what will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the vine dressers, and give the vineyard to others. Have you not even read this scripture? The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. And they sought to lay hands on him, but feared the multitude, for they knew he had spoken the parable against them. So they left him and went away. The single victim mechanism has afforded societies a relatively shaky sense of order. Perceptive artists have been able to pick up on the false sense of stability afforded to us by scapegoating. A song that has always brought to mind the false sense of security the forces that govern us provide is the Radiohead song Like Spinning Plates. The lyrics reflect the dizzying effect of the mimetic forces that govern our lives and the illusion of order they bring.
This is dedicated to our glorious leaders, or at least some of them who saw fit to take us to a war that nobody wanted. Kill thousands of, if not tens of thousands of innocent people. And they shall go to their grave with it on their conscience. And I hope that's okay for them.
An important myth in understanding the difference between Christianity and myth and how they treat the single victim mechanism and the victims of it comes from the life of Apollonius, written by Greek sophist Philostratus. In Book 4, Chapter 10 of the Life of Apollonius, we find the story Girard refers to as the horrible miracle of Apollonius of Tyana. With such harangues as these, he knit together the people of Smyrna. But when the plague began to rage in Ephesus, and no remedy sufficed to check it, they sent a deputation to Apollonius, asking him to become physician of their infirmity. And he thought that he ought not to postpone his journey, but said, "Let us go." And forthwith he was in Ephesus, performing the same feat, I believe, as Pythagoras, who was in Thurii and Metapontum at one and the same moment. He therefore called together the Ephesians and said, "Take courage, for I will today put a stop to the course of the disease." And with these words he led the population entire to the theatre, where the image of the averting god has been set up. And there he saw an old mendicant, artfully blinking his eyes like a blind man, and he carried a wallet and a crust of bread in it, and he was clad in rags and was very squalid of countenance. Apollonius therefore ranged the Ephesians around him and said, "Pick up as many stones as you can and hurl them at this enemy of the gods." Now the Ephesians wondered what he meant, and were shocked at the idea of murdering a stranger so manifestly miserable, for he was begging and praying them to take mercy upon him. Nevertheless, Apollonius insisted and egged on the Ephesians to launch themselves on him and not let him go. And as soon as some of them began to take shots and hit him with their stones, the beggar, who had seemed to blink and be blind, gave them all a sudden glance, and showed that his eyes were full of fire. Then the Ephesians recognized that he was a demon, and they stoned him so thoroughly that their stones were heaped into a great cairn around him. After a little pause, Apollonius bade them remove the stones and acquaint themselves with the wild animal which they had slain. When therefore they had exposed the object which they thought they had thrown their missiles at, they found that he had disappeared, and instead of him there was a hound, who resembled in form and look a Molossian dog, but was in size the equal of the largest lion. There he lay before their eyes, pounded to a pulp by their stones, and vomiting foam as mad dogs do. Accordingly, the statue of the averting god, namely Hercules, has been set up over the spot where the ghost was slain. The story centers around Apollonius, a contemporary of Jesus. From the context provided, we understand that Ephesus is experiencing a plague. Girard notes that plagues were not exclusively medical, but often included a social component. Apollonius tells them, "I will today put a stop to the course of the disease," and is able to incite the crowd to stone a beggar by demonizing him. Here, Apollonius serves as the perfect foil to Jesus in the story of the woman caught in adultery. Jesus appeals to the law by requiring the accusers to cast the first stones, magnifying their responsibility. Girard says, "Not purely rhetorical, the first stone is decisive because it is most difficult to throw." Why is it the most difficult to throw? Because it is the only one without a model. The more those thinking about throwing the first stone perceive the responsibility in throwing it, the greater the chance they will let their hand fall and drop the stone. To stop mimetic violence, Jesus exposes the role it plays in the stoning by challenging the accusers to stone the women themselves. The first to throw a stone at the beggar became a mimetic model for his fellow Ephesians. The first to drop a stone and walk away became a mimetic model for his fellow Jews. These texts show crowd dynamics are not defined by violence or nonviolence, but by imitation, which is contagious. The symbolism of the first stone is still understood because we intuitively understand the mimetic nature of collective violence. Girard describes the mythic situation as a crisis that threatens the community and its cultural systems with total destruction. For Girard, the realism of the descriptions, the violence of the rituals, and above all, the collective violence against a single individual, indicates that these myths are recounting actual events. They're not merely symbolic, but are simply inspired by true cases of collective violence. Girard notes that the beggar displays all the classical features of a pharmakos, a ritual scapegoat in ancient Greece. He was a social nobody, for example, the homeless, those without family, the disabled, the sick, the abandoned elderly, who was killed in a time of crisis to purify the city. Throughout history, it is those who are on the margins of society, Jews, widows, lepers, foreigners, the disabled, who are victimized whenever great panics occur, such as during the Black Plague or Salem witch trials, and these characteristics are common across culture. Their constancy contradicts cultural relativism. Today, it would scandalize us if we failed to see the scapegoating of these marginalized groups. However, this empathy has not often been extended to the victims of ancient myths. Girard wonders, if the victims of the medieval witch hunts are real, why wouldn't the victims of these myths also be? It is no coincidence that the stoning of the beggar takes place in a theater. In the words of Sandor Goodhart, a literary critic who engaged deeply with the theories of Girard, but the goal of tragedy is the same as sacrifice. It always aims at producing among the members of the community a ritual purification, the Aristotelian catharsis, which is an intellectualized or sublimated version of the original sacrificial effect. The sacrificial effect was the restoration of order to a community. Rituals are performed with solemnity because of the mimetic conflict that originates them. They recall the fragile social relations that turn the war of all against all to the war of all against one. These sacrificial murders attempt to achieve the catharsis only present in Christ's passion.
These living mystery guys are the hardest motherfuckers out there.
I recommend doing two things to save the planet: eat bugs and watch Living Mystery.